Hi everyone and welcome to Moonstone Makes. My name is Tommy. Thank you for joining me today. Happy New Year's Eve. It's a cold and rainy Saturday here on the Northern California coast where I'm coming to you from, and today is the last day of 2022, so I thought I would share with you my very favorite books from 2022 and kind of an overall little statsy thing. So I read a lot of books, and if you've been here with me on my channel for a while, through all of my knitting videos over the years, you know that I have always interspersed books into my knitting videos, and it's only this past year that I started actually making book videos because I myself got really into watching book videos, and so when that happens, I just want to make videos. So every month this whole year, I skipped one month. But every other month this whole year, I have been making monthly wrap-up videos for my books. And if you've been here for those, thank you so much. And if you're here for this one now, thank you for being with me through my book videos, because I know originally you were probably here for the knitting, but that's what happened this year. So I'm on Goodreads and Storygraph, and that's where I'm getting my information for this whole little statsy section. In 2022, I read 91 books. And that's like a lifetime best for me. I've always been very into reading and books, but I've never read 91 books in a year before. According to Goodreads, I gave 4 books 2 stars. I gave 5 books 3 stars, and the rest of my books are split pretty evenly between 4-star and 5-star books, so I read a lot of really good books this year. I read very intentionally this year. I read what I wanted to read and what I thought I was gonna like, and overall, for the most part, it worked out for me. The very first book I read this year was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. The very most recently finished book of this year was A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles, which I just finished the other day. The longest book I read this year was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. And the shortest book I read this year is actually just a short story that's on Goodreads as a standalone short story, and it was Galatea by Madeline Miller. According to the pie chart stats on the story graph, the moods of books that I read this year go in order from most read to least read, and they are emotional, lighthearted, relaxing, reflective, tense, mysterious, sad, dark, funny, adventurous, challenging, hopeful, and informative. 68% of the books that I read this year were medium-paced, 19% were slow-paced, 13% were fast-paced. I read 3 books that were over 500 pages, and the rest were split pretty evenly between under 300 pages and 300 to 500 pages. I read 6 nonfiction books, and 93% of my books were fiction. The breakdown of genres is the following. I read 30 books that are LGBTQIA+, 29 literary fiction, 24 fantasy, 17 young adult, which is surprising, 16 horror, 14 science fiction, 14 historical fiction, 12 magical realism, and then it just goes down from there. Contemporary, classics, short stories, romance, graphic novels, speculative fiction, dystopian, history, science, poetry, mystery, memoir, middle grade, religion, philosophy, music, and like 1 essay book. My repeat authors of the year were Haruki Murakami, whose books I read 4 of, Alice Oseman, 4, the Heartstopper series, Emily St. John Mandel, I read 3 of her books, Cormac McCarthy 2, Angela Carter 2, Matt Haig 2, Sylvia Moreno Garcia, Kazuo Ishiguro, Taylor Jenkins Reid, and Kristen Valdez Quaid all 2. Okay, and now I'm going to get into my favorite books of the year. I read so many books. 91 is a lot of books, but as I went through, I definitely felt certain books as I read them hit me differently than other books. I read a lot of books that I really loved, a lot of 5-star books, a lot of 4-star books. I liked a lot of what I read this year. But these 11 and maybe even 12 that I'll throw in at the end books definitely just felt different, hit me in a way instantly that was just different and meant something a little more than the other ones, and mostly all in different ways. So here they are. Here are my 11 or maybe 12 favorite books of 2022. The first really amazing book that I read this year that I fell in love with was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. And this is a book that a lot of people love, and for very good reason. It's short, it's concise, it's romantic and dark and beautiful and pleasing and engaging. So it's a story about a man named Piranesi, and he exists in this labyrinthine, ancient sounding house, kind of, that contains the sea and has tides. There's only one other person who lives in this house. The book is told from the perspective of Piranesi, and Piranesi only knows this person as the other. And pretty much Piranesi's existence, his awareness of the world, is just himself in this house and this other person. And he's going through this book with you, the reader, mostly chronicling the events of the house, mainly the tides, the wildlife activity. There are birds that fly in and out of this house. He finds artifacts around the house that he's trying to piece together in like an anthropological kind of way. And it's very academic the way he does it, and it's very engaging. Piranesi's character is very like positive and optimistic and loving and caring, and he just feels like one with the space that he lives in. There are statues everywhere, there are giant halls. It's kind of an endless labyrinth that he just walks around and documents things. He's trying to figure out his existence, his life, and you're figuring it out with him as the reader, and it's just so fun and engaging and mysterious. And you're kind of in the dark with Piranesi throughout the whole book, and then the story of what's going on starts unfolding towards the end, and there's a big reveal and blah blah blah. It's just so good. It's just so well written and mysterious and dark and creepy, but in like a really optimistic, lovely kind of way. The imagery in this book is so good. I found it to be so transportive. I was like existing in this house with Piranesi, and it's just beautifully done. It's such a good book. It's very short. It's one of these books that doesn't have a wasted word in it. Every single word, every single thing that Susanna Clarke writes in this book is like for a purpose and like propels the imagery or the story or the character development, and it's just kind of perfect. Next is The Magic Toyshop by Angela Carter. This book was written in 1967. It takes place in, at the time, contemporary England. It's about a young girl who goes through a tragedy, and her brother are sent to live with her mysterious toy maker uncle and his wife and her brothers. This is such a cool example to me of a gothic novel, and it's exactly the kind of gothic that I like. It takes place in this very weird, very dingy, disgusting, dark, weirdly laid out house or apartment. Your main character is this young girl. She's a teenager, and she's exploring this house for the first time. She's exploring her new life in this house with these new people that are weird and dark and questionable. And she's trying to figure out her new life with them. Her uncle is maybe kind of evil. He's very scary. He's very mean. He treats everybody very badly. The imagery in this book also is so good. Everything is so dingy and disgusting and gross in this house, and it's all explained in such a romantic way, if that makes sense. This book is very macabre, very dark, and it's gothic. It's got feminist themes. It's this young girl trying to figure herself out, her new world out, coming into her own as an adolescent. It's a coming of age story. It's feminist, it's bleak, it's wonderful. I loved this one. This was my first Angela Carter book, and I was so impressed by it. It's definitely my kind of gothic. The Five Wounds by Kristen Valdez-Quaid. In one way, you could say this is like my favorite book of the year. I'm obsessed with this book, and I think it's going to stick with me for the rest of my life. I think about this book so often. It takes place in modern-day New Mexico. This book is pretty much a glimpse into the life of this family over the course of about a year, and you're following 15-year-old Angel, who is pregnant and then goes on to have her baby during the course of the book. Her father, Amadeo, who is kind of a deadbeat, who is kind of trying, but is also kind of a total deadbeat. And his mom, Yolanda, who is the matriarch of the family and does everything to hold everything and everybody together while also enabling and babying and coddling her grown-up son and continuing his deadbeatedness. I found this book so like intensely relatable. It's about a Chicano family who has a lot of similarities to my Chicano family, and I just found the writing, the dialogue, the characterizations of some of these people to be so, to just hit home for me in like a very real way and also a very funny way. And I've never really seen this kind of representation in a novel that is this good before. This kind of representation of Mexican American life, of Chicano life in America. The way these characters speak with each other, the dialogue in this book, the way they treat each other, the things that they're doing with themselves, for themselves, to other people, to the people that they love, is just so real and so relatable. And like, it's kind of amazing to me that she's captured this story, this fictional story, in the way that she has. It's the most beautiful book I've ever read. It's so there are toxic things in here, really bad, traumatizing things are happening in this book, but at the same time it's just so human and so relatable and so real, and also just like so like, I don't know, there's some funny stuff in this book too. It's probably my most dog-eared book of the year. I just loved it. This book is like, I don't know what it is, but it's great, and I loved it, and I think everybody should read it. Then I read Our Wives Under the Sea, which I think is in the top 2 for my very favorites of the year. So this is by Julia Armfeld, and it's another, I would say, gothic novel. And this is a dual perspective book. You are getting the perspectives alternately of 2 wives, and one of the wives is a scientist, and she goes on a deep sea dive in a submarine, and you're getting her point of view from this expedition that she's on in the submarine. The other point of view is her wife, who is at home waiting for her, and who has pretty much assumed that she's dead because her expedition was supposed to last for something like 5 weeks, and it's been 6 months. The perspectives from the submarine are all very mysterious. Creepy things are happening, but you don't exactly know what's going on. And the perspectives from the wife waiting for her at home are very reflective. She's remembering past moments of their relationship together. You're going through their early days, how they met. Then you're getting taken through the moments where she doesn't know where her wife is and she's missing. It's been 6 months. She thinks she's dead. She's pretty much going through the grieving process without knowing whether she's alive or dead or what's going on. And then finally, you're getting her point of view from the scientist wife having come home, but she's different. Something's wrong with her, and the non-scientist wife doesn't exactly know what, and she's trying to figure it out. She's trying to help her wife. She's trying to contact this like mysterious, creepy institute that she worked for, and she can't really piece together what's going on. There are elements of body horror in it. There are really cool Lovecraftian elements of horror in this book, where it's like the terrifying unknown kind of stuff. There are also a lot of elements of like scientific viewpoints of the deep sea and what life is like deep under the ocean. It's really cool and creepy, and the writing is so engaging and pretty and effortless, and it's really nicely done. The writing in this book is so good. I want to read everything else Julia Armfeld wrote. I loved this book so much. This one is called Chouette, and it's by Claire Oshetsky. And this is a really weird, like fairy tale-esque story about motherhood and about otherness and about not fitting in. Pretty much it's a woman who has an owl baby, and she has to deal with her husband who doesn't accept her owl baby, and his family who thinks she's crazy, and her having to change her life and herself and come to terms with the fact that she is now the mother to an owl baby instead of a person baby. It's really good, and it's very weird. The representations of motherhood and all the weird things that go along with motherhood are super well done in that book. Then we have Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki. This book was so good. It's a science fiction Faustian, deal with the devil, violin prodigy-esque story. It's this kind of like science fiction kind of space opera storytelling where it's very like swift and joyful and fun to read and go along with the ride for. It's not a space opera. It all happens on Earth. But yeah, it has science fiction elements. It has space aliens who run a donut shop. It has a violinist who made a deal with a devil for her soul. It's got a violin prodigy who is a young trans girl who is in the middle of this deal and whose soul is trying to get sold to this devil. And it's just very, it's exactly what I like in this kind of science fiction, and it's also very modern and contemporary in the way it deals with gender and race and class and immigration and acceptance. And I just like, those are all of my favorite kinds of elements to have in a really great, fun sci-fi story. It's so good. It's super fun. It's such a fun read, and it's just like so, it's like happy. Like it's just, it just made me very happy. The next book is Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. This is a historical fiction novel told from the perspective of a ghost in an abbey. So there's this ghost. She is the ghost of a young girl who died in this abbey, which is now abandoned. It takes place in the 1800s, I believe. The ghost died in like the 1400s or something like that. And she's haunted this abbey for a very long time. She lives there, it's her home. And all of the sudden, Chopin, the pianist, and George Sand, the author, and George Sand is a woman, her children come to stay at the Abbey one winter. This event of George Sand, Chopin, and George's children coming to stay at this particular abbey, it's not an abbey, it's a monastery. I don't know the difference. So the monastery is in Majorca, and it's a real event. These were real people who actually went to stay at this real monastery to be creative. George Sand went to write a novel. She was a novelist in the 1800s. And Chopin went to write a piece of music, which was a real piece of music that he did write and come out with. And it's about them and their experiences with each other and how they exist together in this short period of time from the perspective of this like 14-year-old ghost who died way too young and tragically, and her pretty much falling in love with this family. And that's it. It's really beautiful. The writing is atmospheric and so engaging and so good. It's very sensual in this way where our protagonist is a ghost who can't feel things anymore, who can't taste things anymore, and she's living vicariously through these living people who to her are just beautiful and who get to eat food and feel rain and get cold and love each other and touch each other and hug and have these experiences that she can witness but she can't actually feel. And it's kind of insane how like this book describes life from the perspective of a dead person. It's this, I mean, that's kind of the way to put it. This book is like full of life, and it kind of is all about the appreciation of life and being alive and the experiences we get to have as living people. And it's wonderful. Yeah, I loved it. This is We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. It's a classic. It's about two sisters who live together with their invalid uncle in a big house up on a hill overlooking a town. All the townspeople hate them. There was a family tragedy where their whole family died, except for their uncle, and everybody blames the older sister. They are agoraphobic. They're stuck in time pretty much on the day of their family's death. And it's so good. It's very, like I've described a lot of books in this video, it's very dark and it's very creepy, and it's done so in a very pretty way. There are really cool elements of witchiness in this book. The younger sister, Mary Cat, it's told from her perspective, is very into things like talismans and like the power of words and little pieces of nature and magic that she uses to keep her and her sister safe. The themes in this book are super dark, but it's written from the perspective of this young girl who is very matter of fact and optimistic about all of the darkness. It's just so atmospheric in a lovely, dark, messed up way. And it's really well done. I read this in October and it was perfect. Perfect for October. Also in October, I read Leech by Hiram Enos, and this is my other contender for my very favorite book of the whole year, along with Our Wives Under the Sea. This is a Gothic novel, and it takes place in a dystopian future where we're given slow glimpses of the idea that the world has pretty much ended, but civilization is slowly cropping back up in places. It is about a doctor who travels to a large, dilapidated, decrepit manor with a baron and his family who lives in it. The town around them is a mining town where they mine for something called wheat rock, which is fossilized food, and that's how people get their nutrition. And it's pretty much has all the elements of a classic Gothic novel. It has the isolation, the giant house, which is pretty much a character, the family who is just so dysfunctional and weird and terrible to each other. It's got like vague nods to ghosts and hauntings and maybe weird supernatural things. It's pretty much about a parasite and its rivalry with another new emerging parasite. It's so weird and it's so good, and it's just this like perfect combination. It's mostly Gothic in a dystopian setting with teeny glimpses of science fiction. It's another one of these books where it's really beautifully written. It's a story that's really beautifully told. It comes together in such a natural, organic way, and the writing is just, it's effortless and it just flows, and it's so, I just like wanted to live in this world with these people and with the doctor for the rest of my life, even though it was dark and decrepit and falling apart and gross. Okay, we're almost done. This is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and this is a Nobel Prize winning book. This is another book that is like full of mystery. The plot is mysterious. We don't know exactly what's going on until it starts to get to the end. We're following three friends from the point of view of one of the friends through their childhood in this boarding school that they went to, all the way up to the present day. You're pretty much getting told the story of the main character's life, Kathy H., as she tells it to you. The thing about this book is that the less you know going into it, I think, the better it is. I didn't know anything about it going into it, and everything, all of the reveals, all of the like slow burns of this book just were so perfect. And so I don't want to say too much, but it's a story about childhood and innocence and growing up, and also it's dystopian. So then we have Legends and Lattes by Travis Baltree. I read this book pretty recently and it's wonderful. It's a cozy fantasy book. The whole tagline is high fantasy, low stakes. And it's about an orc who gives up her life of gallivanting and like killing and stuff to open a coffee shop, which is a gnomish thing. Coffee is a gnomish thing. And it's just about her living her dream of retirement, drinking coffee, having pastries, finding her found family, and it's amazing and cozy, and you just kind of want to curl up into this world and story and kind of never leave. It was so good. Okay, that was it. I think that was 11 books. I was gonna add A Gentleman in Moscow, which is the one that I just finished. It's by Amor Towles, but I think we're gonna leave it at that. But that book was really, really good. So those were my favorite books I read this year. I'm pretty sure my top two, like very absolute favorites, were Our Wives Under the Sea and Leech. I would love to hear about your favorites. What did you read this year that just really stuck with you, that really impressed you? Tell me your favorite book of the year. Also tell me your least favorite book of the year if you want. Thank you for being here to listen to me talk about my favorite books. I hope you have a happy New Year. Tonight is New Year's Eve. What are you doing? I'm trying to stay up until midnight in my living room with my husband. Happy New Year to you. I hope 2023 brings you lots of joy and good reading and good crafting and good stuff all around. If you liked this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't yet, and comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. All my links are down below if you want to check me out anywhere else on the internet, like on Instagram or Goodreads or Patreon or anything like that. Thank you so much for being here. Happy New Year. I love you so much. And it was a great 2022 in some regards. Okay,